Listen, Sakamoto Days is at a crossroads. As the story approaches what seems to be its final arc, and Yuto Suzuki, the author, is attempting to tighten up all of his loose ends, it's, pretty common, especially in weekly shonen format, for certain plot points and narratives to fall to the wayside, or even get dropped completely in service of getting this train back on the railroad to a conclusion. However, a lot of fans are claiming Sakamoto Days has lost any kind of stakes or tension, and it has severely lowered their expectations of the plot. And the thing is, the sentiment that they're complaining about really isn't anything new. While it's definitely more recent, as about a year or two ago, you wouldn't really see anything but praise for Sakamoto Days, there was a turning point after the less than optimal conclusion of one of the series' most anticipated and hyped up arcs, the Museum Exhibition. This arc had everything. It had build-up, every faction of villains, the anti-villains, and heroes, all having a concrete and justifiable role in the story. We got some of the most exciting fights that a lot of the fandom was genuinely happy to see. All of these great moments culminated in what felt like one of the most rushed, unfocused, and honestly not even really an ending. Despite Takamura's final fight with Sakamoto, Nagumo, and Rion being a bunch of exciting hype, the alarm bells were ringing that something was not all right with the Sakamoto Days narrative. Even the short transitionary phase between this and the prison arc was pretty jarring. Kindaka's arrival brought some level of coherence back to the plot, but it all goes sideways again when Sakamoto is just randomly attacked by Torres, which brings us to a random training arc for Sakamoto that ultimately ends up going nowhere, right? Now, I personally felt like the prison arc was pretty smooth sailing. Shin vs Tenkyu had a bunch of stakes in my opinion, and that is and always will be Shin's most defining moment of his character for me. And then we cap all of that off with Shin's backstory, meeting his dad, and showing where Yuto Suzuki's writing shines in the flashback arcs. And since the prison arc has ended, it's been a pretty controversial and bumpy road all throughout. Now, ultimately, I have been enjoying the roller coaster ride that Suzuki has been taking us on. While I do have my criticisms of Uzuki's plans, as well as his methods, ultimately, that's very much in line with his character, and I can be okay with that. Uzuki has, in canon, lost the plot. His whole entire idea of releasing guns across the country, hoping to prove that human nature was always rotten, completely ignoring the entire reason the social contract exists in the first place. And what? All because no one helped him when he was bleeding out one day? It's just a very immature and unfocused agenda for world domination, but you know what? Seeing how much of an armchair philosopher this man is, it makes sense. The issue a lot of people have is when we lose Asaki, the what seemed to be overarching main antagonist that was pretty much responsible for every major problem in Sakamoto Days. The man is the reason Alkamar started, inadvertently creating Slur's entire gang. Also, we learn in the prison arc that he was the reason Ando defected from the JAA and kidnapped Shin. Asaki's also the reason Yotsumura had to kill his wife, setting her up to seduce him and be a double agent in order to stage a coup against the current JAA chairman. Almost every single plot thread in the series was able to be tied back to Asaki, and well, now he's dead. But you know what? If Suzuki was able to still make the story exciting and end with a bang, honestly, I don't think too many loose ends would ruin the story. The Shishiba Osaragi betrayal arc, as well as the arrival of Kindaka and Yotsumura to save everyone in the prison, were more than enough for me to believe that thought. I even loved watching Shin take up the mantle for Sakamoto when he was too traumatized to act, showing off that growth he got throughout the entire series and making big enough moves that caused the actual main villain to get on his radar. All of this is earned in my opinion, but it's here where the Museum Exhibition issues begin to rear their head again. The story so far, in my opinion, has been crafting this amazing, exciting moment with Shin broadcasting his mental control across a large portion of the country to force a decent percentage of the population to fire off their guns, but it all begins to fall apart once more and more conveniences need to be taken to now get Shin out of the scenario that has been created for him. On my second channel, where I cover series like Sakamoto Days weekly for every chapter, go subscribe by the way, link is going to be in the description, I praised Suzuki for giving us time to watch Shin over the course of the series be able to justifiably do this with Uzuki. I still think this is earned. It's not like Shin is duking it out and pushing Uzuki back against the wall. I don't even think Shin had time to throw a punch because he was at that much of a disadvantage. But my appreciation realization comes in watching Shin use the environment and objects around him to just barely stay out of kill range. Even when Takamura Uzuki appeared, despite what a lot of people seem to interpret, I didn't even see this as Uzuki needing Takamura's personality to kill Shin. I think it's still pretty clear that even if Uzuki never transformed because of the shark's bloodlust, Shin was probably going to die if someone didn't come to save him. However, with Takamura now involved, this becomes much harder for Shin to survive, which is where you begin asking me to suspend my disbelief. Now, someone is gonna have to come save Shin from Takamura Uzuki, the strongest character in the series that has been shown time and time again no one can handle. And you know what? Honestly, I think Suzuki handled it pretty decently the first chapter. All the civilians and the conveniently random appearing assassins that diverted Takamura's bloodlust away, probably the best way to handle Shin not dying on sight. But this is where we get to the main point of the video. The tunnel effect. This video is sponsored by GamerSupps, the ultimate energy and focus formula. GamerSupps is an awesome drink made up of a bunch of vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin D3, B6, B12, and vitamin H. Use the link in the description or pinned comment and use code NOOP for 10% off your next order of GamerSupps. And thank you GamerSupps for sponsoring the channel. In practice, the beginning of Sakamoto Days 216, writer to writer, in my most generous opinion, is a bit ridiculous, but it was set up so tremendously well that honestly, I'm willing to overlook it and find it as just a little funny convenience in the story. Objectively, looking at the story without any prior opinion or bias, in the grand scheme of all the characters that are involved in this feat, it genuinely does make sense. The tunnel effect is a phenomenon in actual physics for all intents and purposes. For Atari, a character we've literally watched create a full loaded gun out of scrap metal using the last of her good luck to be used in this impossible event makes sense. Also, combining the fact that Takamura cut so cleanly that the cells in the human flesh were still alive and kicking and allowed Takamura to slice an arm out of containment and then put it back on as if it was never taken off. I think Atari coming out of the woodworks is definitely a little outrageous, but where you lose me is when Atari's bad luck results in every single villain left in the series conveniently assembling into the same place. Again, I understand it's meant to be written as a convenience. That doesn't make it any good. Everyone has been complaining that Sakamoto Days has no stakes. And at the drop of chapter 216, you can't even say that's incorrect anymore. Because now, not only did we have Shin survive death in one of the most obnoxious ways possible, I made a joke on my recent stream where we react and review the chapters every Sunday that this almost seems spiteful. Like Yuto Suzuki said, "Oh, my story's got no stakes, hold my beer." And obviously, I don't believe that. But it's funny how true that sounds after a chapter like 216, because what has to follow is almost certainly more plot conveniences and forced scenarios to get Shin out of this situation that, quite honestly, he never had to be in. Whatever character shows up now, whatever loophole Shin finds, I just don't think it will be satisfying. Honestly, the only way I think you could save this would be having Shin fire off his mental command on every villain present that hasn't already had it used on them yet. That would make Shin basically useless in whatever final battle is coming up next. Imagine this was actually the beginning of the setup for the big final battle. Everyone just appears right now and dukes it out right here for some rushed conclusion. I will appreciate Sakamoto Days to my dying day. I have nothing but respect for Yuto Suzuki. Fight choreography in Sakamoto Days is flawless, its character design is peak, and when you're really in your bag, Yuto Suzuki can craft an amazing narrative. It's just with how late it is in the series, this fandom is becoming more divisive than ever. What do you guys think? Like I said earlier, I cover this series every week on my second channel, so go subscribe to that one if you want to hear my thoughts on every single chapter, as well as there's always a bunch of extra content showing up on there as well, so don't be scared to subscribe there. Thank you so much, and make sure you hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.